Welcome to today's talk. Today, we're diving into something that affects virtually every human movement you make: flexibility. Now, you might think flexibility is just about touching your toes or doing the splits. But in reality, flexibility is a neuromuscular skill. It's about how your brain, spinal cord, and muscles communicate. And the best part is, flexibility is not fixed. It's plastic. It can be improved. What we're going to explore today are 5 signs based on cutting-edge science that indicate you can significantly improve your flexibility using research-supported stretching protocols. When most people think about flexibility, they think of it as purely mechanical. We picture muscles stretching, tendons elongating, or ligaments lengthening like rubber bands. But in reality, flexibility is far more complex and far more fascinating. It's not just a property of your muscles. It's a neural skill governed by your brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system. In fact, one of the most significant levers for improving flexibility has nothing to do with muscle tissue itself, and everything to do with how the nervous system perceives safety, threat, and control. What we call flexibility is actually your nervous system's permission to access a specific range of motion. When your body senses a stretch that approaches the edge of what it perceives as safe, it initiates what's called a stretch reflex. This is an automatic contraction of the muscle to prevent potential injury. It's a protective mechanism, a neural brake, but here's the critical insight: that stretch threshold is not fixed. It's malleable. It can be reprogrammed, and that's why flexibility is a skill, something you can train. The central nervous system constantly receives feedback from mechanoreceptors in muscles and joints. These sensors, muscle spindles, and Golgi tendon organs tell the brain how much force is being applied, how fast a muscle is lengthening, and whether that movement is safe. If the system interprets the movement as potentially dangerous or unstable, it will send signals to limit range. But with consistent protocol-driven training, we can shift that threshold. We can teach the nervous system that certain ranges of motion are not only safe but useful. Over time, this reshapes both perception and capacity. This explains why someone might feel tight, even when their muscles are physically long enough to access a full range. For instance, someone might have the hamstring length to touch their toes, but if their nervous system perceives that as a risk, may be due to a previous injury or lack of stability, it will halt movement. The body obeys the brain. You'll feel tight, but it's not the muscle that's limiting you. It's the neural signal acting like a governor on a car engine. This is why methods like PNF stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, which combine muscle contractions with stretch phases, are so effective. They target the nervous system directly, recalibrating it to allow a greater range. This process is deeply linked to a concept called neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain and nervous system to change in response to experience and training. If you consistently practice entering and holding new ranges of motion while remaining relaxed and in control, the nervous system adapts. It begins to learn that these positions are not harmful. In fact, it starts to allow access to deeper ranges automatically, even outside of training. It's also important to note that emotional states play a role in flexibility. When we're anxious or under high stress, muscle tone increases. Cortisol and adrenaline elevate our baseline arousal, which tightens the feedback loop between nerves and muscles. This is why people often feel stiffer in the morning or during stressful periods. The autonomic nervous system is ramped up, and this translates into a reduced range of motion. Again, this isn't a muscular limitation, it's neurochemical, but it's reversible. When we pair stretching protocols with calming breathwork, or NSDR nonce, deep rest techniques, we can downregulate the stress response and access a more relaxed, pliable state. So if you're someone who believes you're not flexible, understand this: it's not a fixed trait. Flexibility isn't about being born bendy. It's about training your nervous system to feel safe and strong in extended ranges of motion. And the most promising part: the research is clear. No matter your age or starting point, with consistent application of the right protocols, particularly those that integrate breath, control, and active engagement, you can dramatically increase your mobility over time. In short, flexibility is not simply about stretching tissue. It's about changing how your nervous system interprets movement. Once you grasp that, the entire paradigm of stretching transforms. It becomes a neural training practice, one that not only improves performance, but rewires your body to move with more freedom, control, and confidence. There's a fascinating interaction between our emotional state and our physical body, and flexibility is one of the clearest demonstrations of this. If you've ever noticed that you're more stiff or tight during stressful periods, even when you're not injured or haven't changed your activity levels, you're not imagining it. There's a direct, biologically measurable link between psychological stress and reduced range of motion. Let's break this down. When we experience stress, whether it's emotional stress from work, relationship tension, or even internal pressure from perfectionism, the brain activates the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, or HPA axis. This leads to the release of cortisol, a glucocorticoid hormone designed to help the body respond to challenge. While this is adaptive in short bursts, chronic or elevated stress alters the way our nervous system communicates with our musculature. Cortisol and other stress-related neurochemicals like norepinephrine increase what's called muscle tone. This doesn't mean muscle strength or hypertrophy. Muscle tone refers to the low-level electrical activity in muscles at rest. Under stress, this tone increases subtly across the entire body, especially in postural and mobility-related muscles like the hamstrings, neck flexors, hip flexors, and paraspinals. This elevated tone effectively puts the muscles in a semi-contracted state, even when you're not consciously using them. So when you attempt to stretch or move through a full range of motion, you meet resistance not because the muscle is short, but because it's neurologically overactive. It's like trying to lengthen a spring that's already coiled tight. Even more importantly, stress alters the thresholds of sensory neurons involved in the stretch reflex. These are fast-reacting neurons that detect muscle length and velocity. Under chronic stress, they become hyperresponsive, interpreting even modest stretches as threats to joint integrity. This results in exaggerated, reflexive contractions that limit how far you can go. In other words, when you're stressed, your own nervous system doesn't trust your body to go deep into a range, even if the tissues are capable. The solution, however, is not just to stretch harder or longer. In fact, forcing a stretch during high-stress periods can actually reinforce these defensive neural patterns, making things worse. The key lies in priming the nervous system before stretching to reduce sympathetic activation and enhance parasympathetic tone. One powerful tool for this is cyclical physiological breathing, sometimes referred to as box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing. When you deliberately slow your exhale and lengthen the breath cycle, you activate the vagus nerve, which helps shift the autonomic nervous system toward a state of calm. This shift reduces muscle tone and lowers the stretch reflex threshold, making the body more willing to lengthen. Another research-supported method is the use of NSDR protocols non-sleep deep rest, such as yoga nidra or guided body scans. These are not just relaxation tools. They actually downshift the brain from beta or high alpha waves into slower theta states associated with parasympathetic activation. In this state, the sensory feedback loops involved in stretch perception are significantly less reactive. Once the nervous system is primed, stretching becomes not just more effective, but more sustainable. You're not fighting against the body's alarm systems, you're collaborating with them. Protocols that involve active engagement at end ranges, contract relax techniques, or eccentric loading become exponentially more effective when paired with these nervous system interventions. This also explains why some days you feel more mobile than others, even if your lifestyle hasn't changed much. If you had poor sleep the night before, if your HRV heart rate variability is low, or if you're anticipating a stressful event, your nervous system is likely to restrict your movement capacity. That's not a failure, that's intelligent design. Your body is trying to protect you from instability. But again, protection can be recalibrated through deliberate practice. Over time, consistent use of pre-stretching breathwork, state regulation techniques, and flexibility training during calm states can raise the nervous system's tolerance for new ranges of motion. This is neuroplasticity at work. The circuits that previously limited motion based on perceived threat begin to recognize that these movements are safe, controlled, and valuable. So, if you notice a loss in flexibility during periods of stress, don't see it as a limitation. See it as information your nervous system is communicating with you. And the good news is, through deliberate modulation of your internal state, you can regain that range and even exceed previous limits. Remember, flexibility isn't just a muscular quality. It's a barometer of your internal state. And when you master that state, you master your movement.
One of the most underappreciated tools for improving flexibility, possibly the most powerful, is your breath. Not just the fact that you're breathing, but how you breathe during stretching dramatically influences the outcomes of your training. Breath isn't just a passive life function, it's a direct lever into your autonomic nervous system. And when used strategically, it can transform how your body interprets and adapts to stretching. Let's unpack the biology behind this. The act of breathing is controlled by the phrenic nerve, which communicates with the diaphragm. This isn't just a mechanical relationship. The diaphragm is deeply connected to the vagus nerve, which regulates parasympathetic activity, the rest and digest branch of the autonomic nervous system. This is the same system that slows the heart rate, relaxes muscles, and enhances tissue recovery. When you control your breath, especially your exhale, you send powerful signals through this system that influence muscle tone, reflexes, and perceived safety within the nervous system. Now, here's where it becomes deeply relevant to flexibility. During stretching, particularly at the end ranges of motion, your nervous system is constantly scanning for threats. The muscle spindles and mechanoreceptors in your joints and tissues send information to the spinal cord and brain about how far, how fast, and how forcefully a tissue is being lengthened. If this input exceeds what the nervous system perceives as safe, it triggers the stretch reflex, an involuntary contraction to prevent damage. This is what stops you in your tracks, often before any real physical limit is reached. But when you pair stretching with deep, controlled breathing, particularly slow nasal inhales and even slower mouth or nasal exhales, you shift your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. This reduces the excitability of the motor neurons responsible for the stretch reflex. Essentially, you're telling the nervous system to dial down the threat level. As a result, the stretch reflex is inhibited, and your tissues are allowed to move further, safely. Breathing becomes a real-time dialogue between your conscious mind and your subconscious nervous system. For instance, if you're in a deep hamstring stretch and you find yourself holding your breath or breathing shallow and fast, that's a sign that your system is in a protective, sympathetic mode. In contrast, if you can maintain slow, full breaths, especially with extended exhales, your nervous system interprets the position as safe, and your range of motion increases. There's also a cognitive dimension to this. Breath control anchors attention. It forces the mind to stay with the body. This increases the quality of neural signaling between the brain and the tissues being stretched. The more attentional resources allocated to the task, the more profound the plasticity of that movement becomes. You are not just stretching tissue, you are reinforcing new motor patterns and safety maps in the brain. Additionally, breathing influences the fascial system, the web-like connective tissue that surrounds and integrates muscles. Fascia responds not only to mechanical tension but to fluid pressure and nervous system tone. When we breathe deeply, especially into the abdomen, we increase intra-abdominal pressure and hydrate fascial tissues through subtle internal movement. This makes fascia more pliable and responsive to lengthening. Let's make this practical. If you're doing a flexibility protocol, say, a 90-90s hip stretch, a pancake stretch, or a long lunge, you can apply a simple breathing rhythm. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly through the nose or mouth for 6 to 8 seconds. Brief pause, 1 to 2 seconds, before the next inhale. As you reach the edge of a stretch, time your exhales to coincide with deepening into the range. The nervous system is most receptive to letting go during the exhale phase. That's when stretch reflex inhibition is strongest, and when perception of safety is highest. Over time, this breathing stretch pairing doesn't just improve your flexibility in the moment, it retrains you. A subtle but powerful sign that your body is primed to improve flexibility is how quickly it recovers after a stretching session. If you notice that you can perform a mobility routine, whether it's dynamic stretching, loaded end-range work, or even a contract-relax protocol, and return to normal function without residual soreness, shakiness, or neural fatigue, that's a strong signal. Your nervous system is not only tolerating the stimulus, it's ready to adapt. This rapid rebound is not just about muscular recovery. It reflects the responsiveness and plasticity of the neuromuscular system, especially the proprioceptive loop, the continuous communication between muscles, tendons, joints, and the central nervous system. The faster this loop resets after a new input, the more adaptable it is, and the more trainable flexibility becomes. Let's break down why this matters. When we stretch, especially in ways that challenge the nervous system, such as entering unfamiliar ranges of motion or performing slow eccentric movements, the body undergoes both mechanical and neurological loading. Mechanically, tissues are lengthened. Neurologically, feedback loops are triggered to assess safety, balance, and readiness. For some individuals, especially those new to mobility training or coming off injury, these stimuli result in temporary disruption. Their system hesitates to return to baseline. They may feel wobbly in that joint for the rest of the day, so the next morning, or even experience delayed onset tightness. That's not necessarily bad, it's part of the adaptation curve. But it also means their nervous system is still in the early phases of neuroplastic adaptation. By contrast, if you can stretch intensely, reach new ranges, and feel almost reintegrated within minutes or hours, this is evidence of robust proprioceptive recalibration. Your system received the input, processed it, and said, "This is useful. Let's store it." That fast response is a green light to increase frequency, a critical variable in driving long-term change. One of the biggest misconceptions in flexibility training is that it needs to be long and infrequent. People dedicate 30 to 60 minutes twice a week and expect their body to change. But the nervous system doesn't work that way. It thrives on short, consistent, high-quality signals. In fact, studies in neuromuscular plasticity show that lower volume, higher frequency inputs produce more stable adaptations than sporadic, intense sessions. So, if your body rebounds quickly after a stretch session, your goal shouldn't be to stretch harder, it should be to stretch more often. You're not trying to break the system down, you're trying to educate it. Think of each session as a language lesson for your nervous system. The more frequently it hears the message, the faster it learns. A practical application of this idea is what's often referred to as microdosing mobility. Instead of doing a full 60-minute routine 3 times a week, you can insert 5 to 10-minute focus sessions into your daily routine, first thing in the morning, during lunch, or right before bed. These sessions should target specific ranges you're working to improve and include active components, breath control, isometric engagement, and slow transitions in and out of position. Each time you do this, you're reinforcing a neural map. You're telling your brain and spinal cord, this is part of my usable range. And the more often you reinforce it, the more likely it is to become default behavior, rather than something you have to warm up into. Also, consider this, fast rebound isn't just a sign of adaptability, it's also a recovery biomarker. Athletes and performance-minded individuals often track heart rate variability, sleep, and subjective fatigue. But how your body feels after flexibility training can be just as telling. If you're recovering well, it means your overall system is resilient. If you're not, it may indicate elevated stress, poor sleep, nutritional gaps, or simply doing too much too soon. The takeaway is this: when you rebound quickly after stretching, lean into that opportunity. That's your nervous system signaling readiness. Increase frequency, reduce duration if needed, and prioritize quality of attention and technique. Instead of chasing intensity, chase consistency. Because ultimately, flexibility isn't built by forcing tissues to lengthen, it's built by consistently convincing your nervous system that new ranges are safe, useful, and controlled. Fast recovery means that conversation is happening efficiently. And that efficiency is your gateway to real, lasting change. Flexibility, at its core, is not simply about muscle stretching or joints moving. It's about how the nervous system adapts to allow those movements. And perhaps the most powerful yet misunderstood truth is this: improving flexibility is not about pushing the body harder, it's about consistently training the brain to interpret greater ranges of motion as safe, useful, and natural. What allows this kind of change to occur is a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. It's the nervous system's capacity to change based on experience, repetition, and feedback. Every time you move into a new range, even if it's only a few degrees deeper, and maintain control and composure, you're effectively recalibrating your brain's map of your body. Over time, these small recalibrations accumulate and result in what appears to be a flexible body. But really, it's a more adaptable nervous system. This has massive implications. It means you don't need to be born flexible. You don't need special genetics or elite athletic history. What you need is a protocol that works with the nervous system, and the discipline to apply it consistently. Let's look at what this means practically. Every joint in your body has what's called a motor control envelope, a range within which the nervous system feels comfortable and coordinated. Move beyond that envelope too quickly, and the brain steps in to limit you. It tightens muscles, contracts antagonist groups, or sends pain signals to back you off. But if you gently challenge that boundary on a consistent basis, the nervous system adapts. The envelope widens. That's why frequency is more important than intensity when it comes to flexibility training. Stretching hard once or twice a week will not create lasting changes. In fact, it might do the opposite, trigger protective responses. But training a new range of motion every day, even for just 5 to 10 minutes, creates predictable, low-threat inputs to the nervous system. These inputs act as reinforcement. This is safe. This is useful. Let's keep it. Repetition is the driver. Repetition, however, only leads to adaptation if it includes focused attention and active engagement. Mindlessly sitting in a forward fold while scrolling on your phone isn't going to rewire your brain's relationship to your hamstrings. But breathing into the stretch, engaging the muscles around the joint, and maintaining control during the transition in and out of the position, those are the moments when neural change is triggered. This is where motor learning intersects with mobility. The nervous system learns best when a task involves novelty, feedback, and active control. That's why dynamic movements, loaded stretches, and isometric contractions within a new range are often more effective than static holds. They increase motor cortex activation. They bring in proprioceptive feedback from the joints and tissues. They teach your brain how to command movement with precision, and this command, repeated daily, becomes your new default range. It's also important to mention timing. Performing mobility work at specific times of day can enhance neuroplasticity. For instance, doing your flexibility routine after strength training, when muscles are warm and tissue stiffness is temporarily reduced, creates an optimal window for range expansion. Another effective time is before bed, paired with calming breathwork, to consolidate neural changes during sleep, a known window for synaptic reinforcement. But regardless of timing or technique, the single most important variable is consistency. Your nervous system is constantly updating its internal maps based on use and disuse. If you stretch deeply once and then ignore that range for a week, the brain deprioritizes it. It treats it as non-essential. But if you revisit that range daily, even briefly, you send a clear signal: this matters. Maintain this. This is why it's helpful to reframe stretching not as a workout, but as a daily nervous system conversation. You're not just elongating tissue, you're updating software. You're teaching your body how to move, one neural circuit at a time. And the beautiful thing is, these gains are sustainable. Because you're not forcing change, you're building it from the inside out. You're using your body's natural capacity to adapt through feedback, control, and repetition. So if you want more flexibility, not just today, but long-term, the path is simple but non-negotiable. Show up daily. Keep the intensity moderate. Engage the mind. Involve the breath. Let each session be a dialogue between effort and control. That's how you build a body that's not only more flexible but more connected, more resilient, and more alive to its full potential.